Many who have children in our school system know that, as well as people that are following this, that we implemented a brand new code of conduct for last year's school year and replaced the disciplinary policy that had been in place for a very long time. And I think that was long overdue. A lot of the concerns and comments that we had heard from the community, from advocates about suspensions that we had talked about at both the state level and local level, and trying to reduce the out-of-school suspensions, making sure that that our administrators and teachers weren't forced to make very difficult decisions and would have more of the ability to focus on educating our kids versus policing or disciplining them unless it was necessary. And so I think that coming up with a new process was extremely important.
Any students that are conducting harm or intimidating is not going to be tolerated, and we're going to deal with that as seriously as we can. So although we in MCPS are committed to reducing the overall disproportionate, they are inappropriate, some of them, disproportionate suspensions of our minority students in special ed, we know we still have a discrepancy there. And even though the numbers you will see when Lori Christina goes through them, you will see that we have decreased our numbers, but that's still disproportionate.
We're collecting best practices, and there will be some expectations around best practices, and one of the things that we're doing is strengthening our data collection infrastructure so that we can monitor and actually support schools in where best practices are happening. At the same time, we don't want to cut off avenues for innovation, because one of the things, if you got a chance to listen to the replay of the board meeting, we had one of our principals from Northwood who talked about an innovation that came to her from her students and has been very impactful in that building. And part of its impact is that it's authentic to the student body.
Different communities have different characteristics, except that we know that there are many, many communities, and we know where they are. They have similar characteristics, right? And so to the extent that we are able to identify what are those best practices, but then make sure that we, apply them in those areas, because that worked, what you just described worked 20 years ago when we had, discrete areas with small groups that were evolving. Now we know where they are. We have studies. We know high poverty schools have same characteristics, same demographics, same, pretty much percentage of ESOL mobility and farms. So I'm really interested in how do we capitalize on some of those innovative practices, but then bring them up to a sort of scale within those conglomerates.
Equality is where we set up the same thing for everyone. But equity is where we're truly addressing the needs of that particular area. And so that's why I've always been passionate of giving the power to our principals to decide what's appropriate for their particular schools, understanding that all of our schools are different and all of our school populations are different. And so, but giving them the tools necessary, right? Because equity is also about giving the tools necessary to address what particularly is happening with you. And so from that perspective, I think that there needs to be some basis between all of our schools. But at the same time, that flexibility to be able to decide what is appropriate.
And I don't think kids suddenly get bad when they're in middle school or high school. And they just represent what, they just play out what they were allowed to play out before. And so while you should have programs for kids, you really need programs for adults to explain to them how damaging it is to say things that imply that what you're experiencing is all right, typical, normal for boys. That has to, people can't do that anymore. And at the end of the day, we can talk about disproportionality, but the other side of disproportionality is all these schools have disproportionately minority students. And when a kid disrupts the classroom and you can't teach and the kids can't learn, that has a disproportionate effect too.
Without any other comments, let me just close by saying we continue to be very proud of MCPS as one of the best school systems in the nation, and we continue to be at the forefront when it comes to innovation and really continuing to make sure that we're not only addressing the hot button word of achievement gap, but really truly providing equity for all of our students, and that's what's ultimately at the end. So I want to thank everybody, thank the great partnership with MCPS, thank you, Ms. McGuire, for a great packet, and ladies and gentlemen, we're adjourned.